I think a lot of times when we think about mental health or we try to define it, we think it's about being happy all the time and being in a good mood all the time. And that is just not true, because what is also mentally healthy is when something sad happens, we feel sad. When something frustrating happens, we feel angry. And that is very mentally healthy.
Hello, welcome back to the Girl City podcast series. Today we'll have a conversation about mental health and body image. And we're so glad we invited Stephanie. She's the founder of Body Banter, a Hong Kong charity that engages youth in healthy conversations about body image and mental health. So Stephanie, can you tell Girl City about yourself?
Yeah, hi Girl City, people in the world watching. Thanks Chloe for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. I'm Steph. I'm the founder of Body Banter, which is a registered charity here in Hong Kong, and our work engages youth, as Chloe said, in conversations about body image and mental health. I'm an avid mental health advocate. I share my own story experiencing an eating disorder in Hong Kong, and I also do research on the topic of how we can help people who have gone through experiences that are really tough surrounding mental illness share their stories more openly and in ways that are empowering to themselves and also their audience members. Yeah.
Can you just share us more about the Body Banter? Like, what is it actually?
Yeah, for sure. So I started Body Banter actually in my third year of college, and it came from a very personal place for me. I always like to say that my story really fuels my fire for the work that I do. So Body Banter came out of my experiences with an eating disorder. So when I was a teen, I grew up here in Hong Kong, and when I was a teen, I experienced an eating disorder called anorexia nervosa. I know we're going to have some conversations about eating disorders later, but this particular diagnosis involved a lot of restrictive eating behaviors, compulsive exercising behaviors, and generally just a lot of issues with my relationship with food and body. So I realized that at the time when I was trying to seek help for my condition, I really had a lot of, it was really tough for me to do so, not just because of the societal stigma that surrounds mental illnesses, but also because it was hard to find language for the experiences I was going through.
To express, right?
Yeah. And I think this really comes from the fact that, because of that societal stigma, we don't hear very many conversations, healthy conversations about body image. We don't have a framework to even begin with when we want to express ourselves. So yeah, I think that was one of the reasons why I wanted to start Body Banter and encourage more fruitful and healthy conversations about body image amongst youth.
Do you think like Body Banter is different from other mental organizations in Hong Kong?
Yeah, I think what has been very encouraging for me throughout, particularly during COVID, when I think for a lot of NGOs, we really struggled because we couldn't hold events in the community. It was hard to do our work in the ways that we had been carrying out our activities in the past, so we couldn't hold in-person events, at least. So that was tough for us. But what was really encouraging back then was that I saw the NGO community come together, and I realized that there was a lot of potential for collaboration. So just in response to that question about how I think Body Banter contributes or maybe, contributes to the Hong Kong landscape or what's unique about it, I think about it, I would reframe it just to say, like, actually the NGO space we fill in the gaps of each other's, perhaps there are some things that one organization isn't quite doing so much of, and another one will give back in that way. And I found it to be really exciting. Just mentioning a topic that you brought up earlier before we started our conversation, we recently did a collaboration with an organization that I personally just very much admire. It's called Belonging, and Belonging works with ethnically diverse communities in Hong Kong and creates opportunities for them to engage in conversation through arts. And so what we did during one of our events, we did an event called Unwrapped, and that was the dumpling activity. That was the dumpling activity. Yeah, it was a really fun activity because we had we used old clothing and fabrics as the dumpling wrappers, and then we asked our participants to play around with different materials to create a wrapped version of their stories with their bodies. And then we ask them to unwrap them at the end and share their stories in that medium during that particular event. So that's just one of the examples of how we've worked with collaborators to create events that are perhaps, Body Banter doesn't have so much of an arts emphasis, but we wanted to use the medium of art to communicate our message. And that was one example of how collaboration really helped us fill in the gaps.
Relaxing way. What does it mean, you think, to be like in a good mental health position?
I love that question. I think there are lots of different ways to respond to that question and lots of nuance. But a simple way that I define mental health is being able to experience all emotions, a wide range of emotions, and being able to cope with the ones that are less comfortable as well. So what I mean by that is, I think a lot of times when we think about mental health or we try to define it, we think it's about being happy all the time and being in a good mood all the time. And that is just not true, because what is also mentally healthy is when something sad happens, we feel sad. When something frustrating happens, we feel angry. And that is very mentally healthy because it's us responding in an appropriate way to a situation at hand. So I think mentally healthy, or what it means to be mentally healthy, means being able to express and process emotions in an appropriate way in relation to a situation that's currently in our environment.
Despite now we can perceive in this conversation that Stephanie has very outgoing personality and very healthy body image, right? But she has experienced eating disorders in the past. So can you tell us specifically what's the signs of eating disorders?
For sure. So eating disorders are a cluster of different mental health disorders that affect a person's relationship with food and their bodies. And so in the clinical diagnostic manual, there are actually 8 different eating disorders. But then I think more than most people will have heard of 3 most common ones, which are anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder. And these are typically the ones that people have heard of. And although there isn't a kind of a common theme across all the different eating disorders, there are some features that characterize most of them. And this is usually a disordered relationship with a person's eating behaviors, a person's exercising behaviors, a person's body image perceptions. It also usually impacts the person's daily routines and their ability to carry out the activities in their lives. So for example, they may not be able to go to school or work because they are very malnourished or very tired from these changed habits of eating. They may not be able to engage with family and friends because their mental health is struggling. They feel ashamed of their condition. So these are some of the things that people with eating disorders can experience. But this is also to say that I think a common misconception about eating disorders is that they need to be visible to be valid. People expect that, let's say, a common way that eating disorders are presented in the media is that the person will either have gained a lot of weight or lost a lot of weight. So their body shape changes significantly. And this doesn't always happen with people who have eating disorders. Usually, and a lot of the time, actually, individuals with eating disorders will struggle with significant distress internally, emotionally, and psychologically, but don't exhibit that in a physical way.
How you get rid of the eating disorder?
I think it's about that process of acknowledging that recovery isn't linear and it doesn't happen overnight, and just consistently practicing coping strategies that were helpful for me, like going to therapy, like journaling, like spending time with friends and family so that I could process my emotions with loved ones. I think doing those things consistently was very, very instrumental to my recovery.
I'm so delighted that we have this conversation with Stephanie today. I find it incredibly insightful for us and also for the viewers. So thank you for your time and your participation, Stephanie.
Thanks for having me.
Have a nice day.
I hope you enjoy watching it too. Yay!